instead. So we hope that everything will turn out well for Dr. and Professor Shukran bin Abdurrahman. Dr. Juzmawati is an assistant professor at the Department of Psychology in IIUM, the International Islamic University in Malaysia. She has done her PhD in IIUM as well, focusing on the identification of Malay personality factor structure. Also, just a brief presentation of Professor Shukran bin Abdurrahman. He's an associate professor at the Department of Psychology, International Islamic University of Malaysia. He attained Doctor of Occupational Psychology degree from Murdoch University in Australia. He specializes in occupational psychology and lectures in personal psychology, psychometrics, organizational change and development, career development, and issues in personal and organizational psychology. So without any further ado, the topic for this lecture will be Professor Malik Badri and industrial psychology. Welcome, dear Dr. Juzmawati Fauzaman. The floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope I can be heard clearly. Thank you so much, Kamaluddin. As mentioned, I am replacing Professor Dr. Shukran Abdurrahman. He is unable to attend this session due to an emergency. Please keep him and his family in our dua. Okay, so I will be replacing him to deliver this specific topic, reflecting what our beloved Professor Malik Badri has contributed to the field of industrial organizational psychology. Thank you so much for the brief introduction by Brother Said Jamaluddin just now. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. To all, may Allah bless us all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to replace Dr. Shukran to represent Dr. Shukran for this session. Practically, the discussion will be catering around the contribution of Professor Malik Badri to the field of industrial organizational psychology. Okay, so Professor Shukran had prepared a slide, so I will just go through the slide while discussing his contribution. Again, Professor Malik Badri is my teacher as well, was my teacher as well. So I kind of grew up with him, right, with his knowledge, with his values. All right, up till now, still remember all his anecdotes as well as jokes that he will be using when he is teaching certain concepts as well as certain principles. Those are the memories lingering with us that we definitely cherish. All right, we definitely cherish up until I guess forever. So this is actually the overview of the presentation. How we look into the inspiration of Professor Malik Badri in the context of industrial organizational psychology. And then there will be certain examples or samples that Almarhum Professor Malik Badri's behavior that definitely we regarded them as the exact reflection of the IO principles, the industrial organizational principles. So practically these are the elements that I'll be covering for this session. Okay, yes, reflecting the time that we had with him before. So he definitely will always be the center of the attention as well as reference among students, staff, definitely among academics. right? We did our activities catering around what he can contribute. For example, even our co-curricular activities, we definitely invited him, all right, to give some kind of insight into what we are doing, our co-curricular activities, so on and so forth, up to that point, not only in terms of academic matters alone, right? So his students, as of now, many of them are academics themselves. Um, they hail from all over the world. In Malaysia, there are lots of his students who somehow grew up and built up the either private or public universities in Malaysia. Right, you name it, the public university, University Utara Malaysia, University Malaysia Sarawak, for example, there are a lot of his students, all right, scattered locally in Malaysia as well as internationally. Okay, so in the university, yeah, being his student, right, being his students, and somehow when we had the chance of working together with him in the same department, the Department of Psychology in IIUM, somehow, so the relationship that we had with him is not only confined within the context of academic based relationship. We pave our way into building up a personal relationship as well with him. Okay, and then it can be summed up like it is the relationship is beyond just student teacher or senior junior relationship. Okay, so with this regard, in the context of industrial organizational psychology, so we regarded him as a true leader, right? True leader, whereby he is sharing his inspiration, his vision, his aspiration, and definitely he does not only share those elements, but he himself showed the way to achieve the envisioned ideas. All right. Um, as simply as saying he indeed is a person who really walk his talk, right? So that is actually to us a true conversion of what is considered as a leader. In specific, how do we sort of like link his contribution to the context of organizational psychology? Professor Shukran's area is more into the organizational psychology. He dealt with elements such as organizational change and development, right? So that is his practically forte. So he dwelled also into the industrial psychology aspects, but his strength is more on this or on the organizational psychology. Okay, as we all know, Professor Malik's Badri's specialization is clinical psychology. But when he came to IIUM, because there are not many lecturers at that particular time at the Department of Psychology, so he will be teaching other courses as well. One of the main course that he taught is social psychology. So social psychology, as everybody knows, is a particular subject which serves as a foundation to the organizational psychology. Okay, so his lecture will always be conducted in a way that certain principles is being introduced, and then anecdotes, stories, example will be supplemented so as it's easy for us to understand the principles being taught. All right, so definitely stories. When it comes to stories, when it comes to anecdotes, somehow those are the trademark, right, of Almarhum Professor Malik Badri. So his stories are practically related to the principles and values of IO psychology, right? And apart from just using those stories or giving out the anecdotes, he also will be showing in terms of his own behavior, right? In terms of his own behavior, all the valuable practices that fits into the organizational setting. The way he managed himself or his behavior within a conglomerates of people, for example. is definitely reflective of the principles of dynamic, right? A common principle that we usually teach in organizational psychology. And then the manner whereby he relate himself to people people, other administrative staff, for example, right? So he definitely emulate the exact principles as well as values that should be there and evident in an employer-employee relationship, for example, right? In terms of giving motivation, in terms of motivating people, that is actually his forte, right? And then indeed, as I did mention at the very beginning, his leadership is definitely very much evident, right? Very much evident in terms of his behavior, in terms of how he deal with other people. Okay, all right. So these are some of the examples or samples of his behavior, whereby it really fits into the context of organizational psychology. Um, So in terms of the leadership in organization, so this is a bit of a background of how he paved his way in terms of the leadership context. He served as a formal and informal academic leader, being the dean of the institute as well as subject matter expert in clinical psychology. For example, being a subject matter expert in clinical psychology, he not only paved the way by disseminating, by mere disseminating the knowledge, but also he paved the way to become a leader in psychology, clinical psychology, by advancing or promoting the Islamization element in the clinical practices, for example. So that is one of the element of leadership that he had paved ways for in his own field of clinical psychology. With regards to his relationship with students, with colleagues, and with other staff members, he developed them based on shared interest, right? Based on shared interest as well as specialization between the senior as well as the young scholars. For example, at that particular juncture, apart from just being exposed to clinical psychology, for example, we were exposed as well to industrial and organizational psychology. We somehow had a lot of conversation that is not catering only to clinical psychology. He at all time actually talk about leadership, talk about how to lead in an organization, which is the forte of industrial organizational psychology. So that's how he kind of create a clique or a kind of connection with other people, right? Not within his own forte of clinical psychology. So he kept on using the example of the prophet, how the prophet leads, for example, and that's how he connects himself with anyone, right? So whatever it is, the background of that particular person, he is actually trying to get into, right? To have some kind of similarity, to portray some kind of similarities with that particular person, so that a very strong connection can be developed. Okay, so he definitely, at the end of the day, he nurtured good learning culture because it's always it's practically clearly evident the fact that he loved reading, he loved writing, right? So that is one thing that we cannot sort of like separate from him. Up until his end, somehow he keeps on writing and writing and definitely writing. All right, so he nurtured a very good learning culture, right? A very good learning culture, and definitely developed the value, the scholarship values among the students. Right, whatever it is that we converse, sometimes it's very much personal, but although it started with personal, somehow he still related to something that is very much evident in terms of its principles as well as its values. So that is what we sort of like get from him. Whatever it is that we are in, whether it is formal, whether it is informal, somehow it will be related at the end of the day to something of a value, right? Something of a value, something that has a clear-cut principles from different disciplines. All right, so he also fostered the interaction um, between himself and his students, his colleagues. There is no barrier. All right, there is no barrier. We can somehow go to him and seek his opinion as well as advices, as long as what he has in mind is we can ask him anything and everything under the sun somehow, as long as the advice given to him can develop us, can make us change, can create an awareness in us. So that is the kind of relationship that he always foster with other people, right? Somehow his dealing with his colleague, with his students, is not being bounded by any barriers, right? Not being bounded by any barriers, even when he's actually still experiencing illnesses or something of the sort. Somehow he still is open, right? He still is open for his student. He will be dealing with his students, no doubt about that. We can definitely have easy access to him, right? So that is how he portray himself and display the good values that somehow is emulated by many of his students, or by all of his students. Okay, with regards to the context of the attributes of Zamala in Professor Malik Badri, so the transferring of knowledge happened in a very personalized manner. So in what I meant by personalized manner, somehow he do understand why such question is being uttered or being queried or asked by his students somehow. So knowing the background of the students, knowing why the question is being uttered in such a way, somehow, so he is able to further nurture the students and further address whatever can or will be transpired. All right, will be transpired. So that's how he is with students. Definitely, he showed tender, loving, and care to students inside and outside classes. All right, so it motivates students to be close to him. It creates an easy access, as well as, yeah, we feel very close and very open with him. It's very easy to approach him. He is very much approachable. All right, and he also nurtured good characteristic, and definitely at all time, although we are conversing about something humorous in nature, for example, but at the end of the day, he will link it to certain principles or certain values that he needs us to learn. Right, so that's how we learn from him at all time. Learning happen at all time without fear. Okay, so here, when it comes to this context of transferring knowledge in a personalized manner, so he will be guiding students to have the right mindset about the subjects he taught. Okay, so that is very important according to him. The moment you have the right mindset, somehow you should know and you should be able to maneuver your way around in the subjects, how hard they are. You will be able to maneuver them positively and motivatedly. Okay, and then definitely while he's teaching, somehow all the principles are substantiated by case history data, right? A real data that he will be using based on all of his cases that he had experienced before, that he had handled before, definitely supplementing them with Quranic verses as well as hadith. Okay, these somehow, when there is an opportunity for the students to look at and see the empirical evidences, somehow it creates some kind of experience. It creates in students experiencing some kind of positive psychosocial functioning when learning from him. Right. We are. I may use the word mesmerized, for example. At the end of the day, yes, we are definitely mesmerized with him, right? With the principles, with the way he conduct his own self, for example, and the manner whereby he teach students at that particular time. So he really created a very positive psychosocial functioning, right, in the learning experiences that he conveyed or delivered to the students. So definitely he makes students and colleague things, believe, see, and do what they might not do without his inspiration. He definitely has that. Right? It's a very simple, like I have an experience of being in the martial arts, for example. It's something totally non-academic. It's an extra co-curricular activities, for example, in martial arts. But we invited him to give some kind of motivation because we are approaching a competition, national level competition, for example. He managed to create an environment whereby he is able to relate the element of motivation, the element of resilience, right? The element of motivation, the element of resilience into something that is non-academic, that is co-curricular in nature. So that's how it is. Okay. In terms of being critical, all right? In terms of being critical, so he is very much critical, but he is able to deliver his criticality without upsetting other people's view or point. It's one thing that I really admire, and again mesmerized with the fact that he's able to do that, being critical, but not upsetting or undermining other people's point of view. So he will be guiding students in related fields. I mean, students may not be enrolled in his class somehow, right? Students may greet him on their way to the classes, for example, but they also have a very great, good connection actually with him. Yeah, Professor Shukran wrote this. There was a medical doctor sitting in our clinical psychology class. Yes, right? During our time when we are in his clinical psychology class, actually one of our classmates is a medical doctor, right? And the criticality of his ideas is unquestionable, right? Unquestionable. Like we are all aware of his book, for example. There are a lot of criticism that he made on many Muslim psychologists who are just parroting the Western views. This is very much evident in his work, right? So this is what we acknowledge or greatly acknowledge his effort in terms of his the criticality of his ideas. Okay. When he taught in IIUM, he never failed to consider or take into consideration the local context, trying to fit the local context with the principles, right? Sometimes, we had the opportunity to discuss with him within the local context. How can the principles be applied? Is there any kind of changes that can be introduced to the principle so that it suits the local needs as well as the local context? Okay, and then he always mentioned to us that we need to have a check and balance, right? We need to have a check and balance, although a theory might be professed all throughout the world, for example, but we still have to be critical whether or not it's suitable to be used among the Muslim societies. So that is one anecdote, one very common point that he will always stress while teaching us. So he positioned his stand and approach in Islamizing psychology. So this is actually the context. It is an effort to revise the knowledge so that it will be in line with Islamic teaching. So he will again and again remind us the fact that we are there to make some kind of needed changes, right? Make some kind of needed changes. He also, at all time, he will remind us that Islamization is not an attempt to blindly reject the Western philosophies or the Western point of view or Western perspective. So that is his reminder always. Okay. So he reasoned out the essentiality of Islamization, underscoring the fact that psychology cannot be beneficial to Muslim unless it has been culturally adapted. So this indigenous element is always captured in his practices as well as in his teachings, right? So we learned a lot the fact that his practices are very much indigenous in nature. He tried to localize the effort, localize the principles so that it fit into the needs of the community. All right. And then he is ever ready to deliver talk at any time. Sometimes the talk that we organize is late at night, but he is ever willing and ever ready. So that is one of the qualities that we have in him. Up until when he is suffering, he is enduring his illnesses somehow. Somebody, his colleagues, ask him whether or not he's able to deliver a talk. He will say yes. He will never say no. So that is his behavior, his leadership element that has been showing without fail until the end of his life. Okay, we have a lot of pictures with him from when he is still very young up until at the very end of his time. We have a lot of pictures with him. Right, so these are some of the way he showed tender, loving care in either formal or informal setting somehow, and this context will definitely motivate others to be close to him, to really want to be close to him. All right, so he provides motivating statements to students, colleagues, all right, especially during difficult or challenging time. I did remember enduring an experience, a very saddening experience, and how he made the effort to visit us, all right, to visit me, to visit us during our difficult or challenging time. So definitely, he attend to people who greet him in public space, right? It's very normal. All right, it's very normal. You can greet him at anywhere, right? He's very approachable in that sense, showing great hospitality to people whom he received at his office, home, and definitely his own home country. Professor Shukran, I think, had a number of visits, a number of visits while he was away in Turkey, for example. All right, and then he was received very well by Professor Malik Badri. And then definitely he inspired confidence among people and provide supports to them. Okay, I am sorry. I thought I have shared my screen actually. Okay. Okay. So this is the some of the elements, how he showed his care as well as love to other people. Right. Just a quick question. I mean, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Ustada, we hear you clearly.
Yes.
But the slide is a little bit, I don't know if it's possible to adjust a little bit. No, it's fine. It's fine. Please continue, Ustada. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. So the slide, is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible. Barakallah
Yes,
feek.
please.
All right. And then, so these are some of the elements written by Professor Shukran, and how he is showing the tender, loving care in all sorts of setting, whether it is formal settings, whether it is informal setting, right? And therefore, the manner whereby he portray himself in that formal and informal setting will definitely provide more motivation for people. All right, so he consulted others on matters that require due attention, all right, leading to good extent of positive impacts. All right, at the end of the day, whatever it is that he did, whatever it is that he delivered in either formal or informal setting, people will be left with a whole lot of motivation at the end of the day. Right, so that's how he is. Okay, so he definitely will register well wishes on students, colleagues, making dua. This is one thing that all of his students will be missing, making dua for their success. Right, at all time, actually, when we met him somehow, so we'll be saying that, Prof, can you make dua for us? Right, without fail. right? Without fail. So definitely he will honor and he will adore young knowledge seeker, right? So he give motivation to them, right? You are still young. There are so many things that you can accomplish at the end of the day. So all right, so this is actually a saying, right? A saying, a statement from our ex-student of IIUM at the Department of Psychology, Jatmir. I think he is the man who, despite being 85 years old, still doesn't hesitate to sit down with random students like me and talk passionately, just like a young man. Right. Okay, so this is how students see him. It's very easy, although there is a huge age gap between the students and him somehow. But we feel very much comfortable with him, right? Although we are very young, and he is very wise somehow, but he still can sit with us somehow and discuss things. Sometimes, being a young person, for example, sometimes our ideas may not be well refined, for example, but he still attended to our queries and our insights as well. Okay, so this is actually a picture of Professor Malik Badri with Dr. Abdul Latif, who is now the head of Department of the Fundamental Knowledge in IIUM. So these are some of the statements given by students, Jatmir, for example, and then this is statement by Dr. Abdul Latif, right? Being missed by students, I will miss him very much. Thank you for your kindness and dedication in teaching us. May Allah bless. May Allah continue flourishing you with His blessing. Okay. Sometimes with him, we don't regard him as our teacher, but we regard him as our father. Right? We regard him as our father. And I remember actually my father himself, my late father himself, had the experience of meeting him. All right. My father told him that you have to take care of my daughter. You have to take care of my daughter. So that is how the connection that we have with him. Right? He's my teacher. But at the end of the day, deep down, I feel that okay, since my father is no longer around. Somehow before, when he is still around, he's the father, right? He's the father. He's the father to all of us, right? Especially when me, Professor Shukra, we are the first batch of IIM psychology students somehow. So we definitely grew up with him, right? We definitely grew up with him. Okay, so he is actually a source of our pride, right? Source of our pride. So this is a statement by Saleha Idris. We are so proud of Professor Malik Badri, who will be appointed as the president of the International Association of Muslim Psychologists. Right. And one of the other character that he always portray is humility. All right, humility. So that is very clear-cut evident in himself. He is the word, right? He is the word. Very much humble, right? Very much humble despite of being known all over the world. For example, he is still the humble person that we know he is, right? That we know he is very much. And very a loving teacher, right? A loving teacher. That will be in my own experience, for example, there are quite sometimes that I had not had the chance to meet him. But after that long period of time, the one time that I am able to meet him, he definitely mentioned my name, right? He remembered, right? He remembered. That created some kind of a big acknowledgement, right, to all of his students. Definitely, he will be giving moral support and guidance to the juniors, all right, and very much being assertive on certain issues that require certain attention. Right, so he stresses a lot on certain things that he feels pertinent to be dealt with at that particular juncture. Right, he will be stressing that up until we do understand. Hey, at this particular juncture, the only thing, the one thing that we have to focus on is this, and this. All right, so he will always, he inserted that ability. So he wants us to develop the ability to know which one we have to prioritize, right? To that extent. Okay, so I think these are some of the evidences how he reacted, right? How he reacted. He always used this word, dear sons, dear daughters, right? This is a specific statement that he issued to Professor Shukran. Yesterday, Brother Dr. Mustafa Omar told me about your election as Dean of IRK. I was quite delighted by this well-deserved election. May you have a blessed deanship in which you can bring back IUM to its golden age. May Allah bless and support you. May Allah support you and bless your efforts, Malik Badri. This is February 9, 2019, the first year where Professor Shukran hit the deanery of KIRKHS. Okay. So this is the another support he gave. I strongly support this academic relation with this Thailand university. As the department in an Islamic international university, we should offer our example to neighboring universities, learn from them, and helping them to learn from us. So this is with regards to our collaboration with a university in Thailand, all right? BSRI, Behavioral Science Research Institute in Sri Nakarin Wirat University in Thailand. Okay. Okay, and then another way he used to do in terms of nurturing and facilitating learning, right? In terms of nurturing and facilitating learning is facilitating learning by reading, discussing, and verifying students' learning on subject matters in both formal and informal settings. Right, so we can just like show him, or we can just like query, put up an issue or a point of view, right, that we want him to deliberate or elaborate. He definitely will be doing that, right? His focus is very much sharp on that particular issue that we raised, right? So that is his critical ability that I, to a large extent, personally, I kind of missed, right? He gives respect to students, academics of all domains of knowledge, right? Of all domains of, I still remember actually inviting him for my martial arts talk, for example. He mentioned this, if I am in your position, I would do the one thing that I can do best, right? If people attack me, I will run away, right? I will run away. So that kind of jokes, but somehow it does make sense, right? It does make sense. Okay. Okay, so this is another example, actually, of postgraduate students from another university. We're talking about postgraduate students from another university walk into the Department of Psychology wanting to seek his advice on some issues. People wait. People will definitely wait for him just for the sake of seeking his advice as well as his knowledge, right? And definitely he sponsors his students to learn the ropes in such fields, right? And definitely he introduces his student to the right kind of network. He created that network so that his students actually can be supported, right, in their effort to advance the knowledge. So that is definitely him, right? Okay, and definitely he is very much attentive to other people, right, who came from his students, who came with his students. All right, our relationship with him is not restricted only between him and us because we are his students. No, right? He get to know our sons and daughters, our families, right? He get to know my dad, for example. All right, so that is the kind of relationship that we usually have with him. All right, it's undescribable somehow. Okay, just consider as indescribable. Without him around, somehow we definitely miss him. Okay, so this is actually in one of the meetings. This is the first time that he is on the verge of moving back to Sudan. Right, this is actually the event. Okay, so we have Professor Rahmatullah, Dr. Alizi, Dr. Azman, Zaki, and Professor Shukran himself. So this is the last gathering that we have before he moved back to Sudan. Okay, so definitely this is one of the core things that we in industrial organizational psychology really adored, having his ability to think and plan for the future, right? Plan for the future with wisdom. So this is the thing. So I always ask this, somehow I always contemplate how is he able to see what is required in the future, something of the sort. I hope I am not exaggerating somehow, but I find him that very visionary in that sense, right? Very visionary in that sense. For instance, he had delivered a talk in early 2020, preparing his psychology students to expect what would happen post-pandemic. Right, so this is how visionary he is. He have futuristic big picture, and then he will be proposing plan to lead people in getting there. Right? Okay, so he definitely emphasized the relationship with the creator and accept that all he has this time for us. He will always remind us on that. So you have to be able to be open and accept what comes in your way. So that is his more or less definite word, right, that I still remember up till now. So he emphasized the need to improve and change the inner nature of the human being spiritually and morally in order to succeed in present world and hereafter. All right, so he always professed, or he always reminded us, get to know yourself. Get to know yourself by just see things in you. You will see everything clearly. All right, so he nurtured the students to learn the need to Islamize psychology in order to make the knowledge be of help to Muslims. Again, he will be saying something along the line that, sometimes we don't have to be the recipient of everything that we have in the world. You can even create, you can even change or refine things so that it suits the needs of your own community. Okay, and definitely making the students learning invaluable lessons from his talk and lecture, enabling them to understand the field better and to correct what they had learned from psychology from the mainstream resources.
Excuse me, Ustada. Yeah, here it's the conclusion. Okay, barakallahu fikum.
Okay. Right. So with a period of 30 years tutelage under Professor Malik Badri, has provided the speaker and friends with enormous extent of knowledge and allowed many to observe a vast population of praiseworthy productive behaviors in him. All right. It is definitely he again, at the end of the day, he really walked his talk. Right. And those are the behaviors that we uphold in our mind, and we always remember, and that those are the behaviors that we wish we are able to emulate. Right, we are able to emulate. Therefore, the attribute of Murabi is very much evident in him. Okay. So this is Professor Shukran's word. I will be reading from this. May the characteristic that were deliberated be considered as Prof. Malik's Amal Saleh, and the examples of behaviors he manifested would continue to be our reference that will also return to him as beneficial knowledge that he left for us. With that, thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Dr. Juzmawati, for a great presentation. And subhanAllah, it's amazing to really, with all of you who met Professor Badri, to really see how he was a living example of how a teacher should be, right? I mean, it's so beautiful to see, and how you guys have in your work and research and try to implement his character into your works. It's beautiful, mashallah. May Allah bless both of you, Dr. Juzmawati, and also send our regards to Professor Shukran. And please, dear participants, keep Professor Shukran and his family in your du'as. He was supposed to do the presentation today, but due to private issues, he could not join us. But Dr. Juzmawati did an amazing job in presenting. I'm so sorry. I should have said to you that your PowerPoint It was not show. I didn't know that you were supposed to have a PowerPoint. So Ustada Diana, thank you for mentioning that as well. I just had I have a thought, Ustada, regarding, I mean, it seems like all of you who met Professor Bedri, and I spoke with so many of his students and colleagues and family members, that he was a living example of what he was teaching. So he was not just, theoretically speaking, he was also embodying it both in himself and also in his interaction with his students and colleagues. Is that so?
Yes, if I may somehow address that. Yeah. So again, walking his talk, right? Walking his talk at all time. So that is the way it is, right? So it's very easy for us, his students, actually, to understand things because of what? If we don't understand the principle, somehow it is evident in his behavior, right? It's very clear cut in that sense. So it's very easy actually for us to emulate because it's already there, right? The behavior is already there. If you don't know what to do, and in any situation, somehow he had already shown it to you. So it's very easy.
MashaAllah. That's a great way to work as a teacher. So we need to all be inspired by that methodology. So barakallahu feekum, Ustada. Feel free to give digital applause, dear excellent participants, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for taking time. We know it's a last minute thing as well, and you did an amazing job. Please forgive me for any shortcomings. Barakallahu feekum. So as we learned how Ustada and Dr. Abdurrahman has used Professor Malik Badri's example in their works with industrial and organizational psychology, we will now move forward. And I was actually thinking about the concept of refit and how to be a son companion. It feels like this aspect was really internalized in the relationships between Professor Badri and his students, subhanAllah. So next person is Professor Dr. Omar Hassan Kasule. That will have a speech and a lecture right now. Professor Omar Hassan Kasule is